Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast unofficially sponsored by Moe's Tavern. I'm Chris Daly, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with my friend, Jon Westhoff. John, how's it going tonight, man?
It's going good, Chris. Thanks for having me again. And I am a big Simpsons fan, so I appreciate the reference.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And yeah, thanks for coming back. You're joining an elite group of people who are trying to see how many times they can come back to my show. So far the number is two. So you're in a very elite group.
All right, look at me, two timers club.
Yeah. There's a race for third time. I'm not sure who's going to get it. We'll have to see.
There was a rumor that you stopped the show until I could be on the second time. Is that true?
I can either confirm or deny that. All right, man. Well, just like last time, I like to start these things off with an icebreaker question. Today's question, if you can remember, what was your very first email address or your very first online screen name?
I think I still have both.
Oh, nice.
JTHD35 at hotmail.com. Still live out there. You can send all the spam there because everybody else does. Um, and that was a nickname that a buddy of mine, we were in a band together, and there's a comic, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Hmm?
So he called me Johnny the Homicidal Drummer because I was very aggressive when I played, so it kind of just stuck. So
Nice.
JTHD was and then that was the same for the for the AOL screen name, JTHD35. I still use it on Twitch and when I game or stream on there, so it's kind of stuck.
That makes so much more sense now because I remember seeing your screen name. I'm like, I don't get what all of these mean. I know it's you, but I'm like, I don't understand. But it's good to finally know the story behind it now.
I should have been smarter and use my real name or my company name, but instead I'll use an old gamer tag from 35 years ago.
There you go. Speaking of being a drummer, I have someone I need to talk to you about, and we'll do that after the show. I have a buddy who has a podcast all about drumming. He likes to interview different drummers, so
Nice.
be kind of a cool thing. My screen name, I don't really remember having a screen name, but my first email address, macho madness at hotmail.com,
Oh,
because
nice.
I am a big wrestling fan. And so that was like, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so cool. One of the ones that one didn't stick around very long. But one I still have that I use for Xbox and for a few other things is Deadman 2484. And
Okay.
that was a great one because again, it's a wrestling reference. The 24 is because I was 24 years old at the time, and 84 is the year I was born. So super clever. Apparently I didn't think like you, I didn't think for the future, thinking that I'm not going to be 24 forever. So yeah, so it kind of just it stuck. I don't use it as much anymore, like I said, just for mostly online gaming and spam email, kind of like you. But yeah. Oh, the things we
That's
do
funny.
when we're young.
I know, right? It's actually kind of a funny question because, yeah, I have a bunch of friends who still kind of, like I said, their Xbox name remains as their, old AOL screen name. It's funny to think
Yeah.
about the golden days of the internet.
For sure. All right, man. So, in the time we've talked since we talked last, you've been very busy up to a lot of really cool stuff. One of which I kind of want to talk about because you've been the envy around my house because my family is also a bunch of Simpsons fans. I saw
Ah,
that recently, a couple 3 months ago, you guys took a trip to Simpsons USA.
we did.
Tell
We
me
did.
about tell me about Simpsons USA.
Well, this time, for the first time, we went to the California expansion. We've been several times to the one in Florida. I will say right off the bat that the Florida one is miles and miles better. They just
Okay,
have more space.
sure.
California, it's kind of everything smushed in. Simpsons Land was kind of added into Universal late there. So I definitely recommend the Florida one, but the California one is great. Both of them are great. I mean, if you're a Simpsons fan, they do such a good job. It's worth the trip into Universal just for that. Besides the fact that Universal is probably the best theme park on the planet as well. So
Sure.
you have plenty of other stuff to do, but the Simpsons Land is just so cool. All the little things. Um, I will say that it's probably fitting, but the Krusty Burger is really bad, and that's probably fitting of Krusty, right? I don't think their
Sure,
intention was to make it bad, but it did happen to
sure.
work. That his products are pretty gross in general. My son loves it, but I thought it tasted like the worst cafeteria food I ever had. But all the other stuff, Duff is really good. The Flaming Mo is non-alcoholic, but it is like they put dry ice in it, and it fizzes over, and that's super fun. And all the swag you can get there, and of course they have Bort license plates. And there's just so many cool nods. It's I just love it. The first time I went, it was just like I was just overwhelmed at how cool it was, and I hope it
Well,
sticks around. I hope now that Disney's bought it out, they don't like take it down or something like that.
man, that would be a bummer because that looks like a really cool thing. You just basically just show up and walk around Springfield.
Yeah, and the Simpsons ride, I get intense motion sickness. It's an amazing ride. It's really funny. It's cool, but it's all motion. So my kids and my wife enjoy it more than I do. But when I can open my eyes and not feel like I'm gonna barf, that
Yeah.
is super cool. But there's only one ride in both of the places. All the rest is like ambiance going into the Quickie Mart. Like I said, buying Lard Led's donuts, you get Bumblebee Man tacos, going to Moe's and have a Duff. So it's more about which again, that's really what we fans want anyway.
Sure.
It would have been cool though if like they had the Simpsons house and you could walk through it, and maybe someday.
That's pretty awesome. Do they have like characters in costume that walk around? You get to take your picture with them and stuff like that?
So they didn't in Florida, or at least we've never seen, but they had a ton in California. We saw Krusty,
Really?
we saw the whole family. My daughter was so excited; she got to take her pictures with them because I'm a horrible dad and I let my 10-year-old watch Simpsons, but only up to a certain season because it does get a little raunchy in the
Yeah,
middle
yeah.
season. But no, they loved it, and yeah, that was a cool touch of California that we didn't at least experience it at Florida in the 3 or 4 times we've been.
Nice. Well, I'm on board with you as a terrible dad because my 8-year-old watches it, and my now almost 17-year-old, when she was around the same age, she's watched it religiously a bunch of times. So,
We
yeah,
started with the Halloween stuff, and those were okay, and my
yeah,
kids are big into Halloween, and then we kind of slowly started watching the episodes, and then my daughter actually had a hard time during COVID times and was sick a lot. And I started letting her watch more and more, and then I didn't realize until like season 8 and 9, you're like, oh, this gets a little risque. But at that
yeah,
point, we were in deep. She was binging the seasons like every time she was sick. She may have been pretending to be sick just so she could do that. I don't know.
yeah. We tried when my oldest was around the same age to kind of just binge it and go through, from the very beginning and just go all the way through. And I don't recommend that because it is rough to get through if you just sit and just watch nothing but Simpsons because that's a lot of show to get through.
Yeah, it sure is at this point.
Yeah, and with the Halloween ones, we kind of do the same thing. And in my opinion, I think the older Halloween specials are miles better than the more recent ones.
Oh yeah, we probably died out around 20. We stopped watching it regularly, and I haven't watched the last 15 seasons or so I can't say I've heard some pretty good things, but the first like 10 are just amazing.
So
So we
good.
watch those every Halloween, and
Yeah.
that's how it all started.
Those are kind of the ones that, stick to Halloween. Now they kind of, you know, Halloween is really loose. It's a loose term.
Yeah,
It
it's
kind
just
of just,
crazy concepts and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. All right, man. Another thing I wanted to talk about that you've been up to is something I've also wanted to kind of get into and get started doing is Lorcana. Is it Lorcana, Lorcana?
I've heard both. I think it's Lorcana, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about it. All I really know is it's kind of like Magic the Gathering, but Disney themed. Is that pretty much the nail on the head?
You know what I've only played the game a few times, but I think it's closer to Pokemon in that
Okay.
you don't like Magic has a lot of interactions between turns and on other people's turns. Lorcana is like you do your turn, then they do their turn. You might have some abilities that happen on their turn, but you're not playing cards and in response to their. So it's a little bit more like Pokemon from what I understand, um, of what I remember playing with my kids. But it's a really cool game. It is a card game. It is you're battling somebody else,
Yeah.
but you're on a quest for lore. You're the characters from Disney have come into this universe, and they're trying to get the lore, which is like clues to what they need to do. So it's a little different than other games. You're not trying to take down their life total, but you are trying to stop them from getting lore while you get lore, and you do that by tapping your creatures like you would in Magic or something like that. But it's a lot of depth. The game is really cool. Obviously, a huge part of it is I kind of just got some cards from a buddy of mine who was like, yeah, I tried it out. I wasn't too interested in it. I thought, honestly, I'm a huge Disney fan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Magic the Gathering fan. So to me, I was like, it's not really going to scratch that itch. Magic has 25 years of mechanics and cards, and it's just so rich in how you can play the game in 100
Yeah.
different ways. So I thought, this new Disney game, it's probably going to be cheesy, for kids. But I just loved it. And then the fact that my kids loved it, and it was, I don't want to say easy, but the rules are more streamlined for, newer people. It's very much designed for beginners and people to be able to easily come into the game. And I actually think that that's smart. And there is a lot of depth to the game that you can get into. Otherwise, you can just put your characters down and try and get lore before the other guy. You can make it as simple as you want. They made like a board game version, which is a cool way to learn. So they've done a really good job. And then if you're a huge Disney nerd, they're doing so many nods to the movies, and the art is insane. So if that part of it interests you at all, there's tons of people who just collect for the art. I mean, it's got everything, especially if you're a TCG person and you're a Disney nerd. I think it's a total home run.
That's cool. Yeah, I was looking at the art for that new Ursula expansion. It looks incredible.
Yeah, it's so good. So many cards are just like, but then that's one hard part of the game is like you see a character and you're like, oh, this is my favorite character. I want to play him. And it's like, some of the cards are not going to be as good as others. That's just the way it goes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of us want to play our, Robin Hood decks and our Winnie the Pooh decks, and it's less like those cards aren't there yet. So that's been a hard part for some people. There's a lot of women play Lorcana, which is great. A lot of kids are playing Lorcana, which is great. So it's a total different dynamic when you go to the shop to play that compared to, older games like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh.
That's cool. I know my oldest daughter's been bugging me forever to teach her how to play Magic the Gathering, but I haven't played for years because most of the people I played with just don't play anymore. So I've got all my cards laying around. I could teach her, but like you said, I think the rules are kind of complicated. I think she'd have a hard time getting her head around it. Plus the fact that I'm pretty sure most of my cards aren't even play legal anymore because I think a lot of them have been retired or whatever.
Yeah, and so like Magic's eternal, right? You can play, loosely with certain rules in different
Yeah,
formats. We could set up a webcam, try to teach her one day if you want, but it's a very complicated game.
yeah,
My kids have been playing since they were like 5 years old. They get it to some extent, but even still, there's so many different mechanics. It's like,
yeah,
what the hell is horsemanship and what is banding? And some, especially if you play certain formats like Commander, where people will pull out a card from 30 years ago, and you're like, I got to look up the rules text because I do not understand what the hell this card is.
yep,
Which is, it's kind of fun for old nerds like me. We're like, ooh, that card's cool. But yeah, I could see somebody coming in new like this is too much.
yeah, for sure. All right, well, kind of segueing a little bit, the meat and potatoes of today's talk. I want to talk to you about your brand new comic,
Yeah,
Last
you're one of the
L.C.S.
few people on the planet that has read the comic, and hopefully, lots more will follow you, or hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, man, it was so good. Like, you told me, it's I got this new book, L.C.S., and I was like, okay, I need to know what this is. And so you told me, and then I was like, all right, yeah, totally, I'm in. And for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, because your Kickstarter is going on right now for a little bit longer, why don't we get into a little bit about what the book is, what it's about?
So the short pitch is a series of global catastrophes has left life on Earth decimated and made comic collecting a huge disaster. It is a post-apocalyptic comic book. Most of the life on Earth as we'll reveal through the comic, for a series of calamities has happened to the planet. A lot of the ones that you hear about, global warming, volcanoes, nuclear. Let's just say a lot of it happened at once and left us, out in the cold. So this follows a group of survivors, which I had the idea for a long time where I wanted like multiple events to happen at once, and I was thinking about this world and what would it look like, and it just couldn't. I love post-apocalyptic fiction, The
Yeah.
Road, and 28 Days Later, and stories like that, and it's just so intimidating. Like there's just so many good ones, right? So what do I
Mhm.
have to say about that? And one day I was like, well, what would I do if it was apocalypse? Well, I'd probably still go around and collect this stupid shit like the shit you see behind me. I'd probably be like, oh man, remember that action figure I didn't get? I'm gonna go see if I can break into the Walmart and not get killed by these zombies so I can get that, Avengers action figure or something like that. I
Yeah.
just thought to myself, that's probably what I would do if I was the only one left. Um, and that was kind of where it clicked to me. It's like, okay, this is my in for a post-apocalyptic story. I don't remember anybody doing anything like that. So why don't I give it a try? And again, as I think I mentioned last time, I often sit on stories for a long time until I find the right team to work with, and that team happened to be one person in Winston Gambro, who I met through social media. He's a great and actually happens to be a local to me creator. We
That's
worked on,
cool.
we worked on the Simpsons anthology together. He did the cover, and I've read a bunch of his books, and I was just like, I think he's the right one for this. Pitched it to him, and he was all in on it. So that was
Nice.
how L.C.S. came to be.
And it's kind of cool because, usually you would think when in a post-apocalyptic story, some of that kind of trivial bullshit kind of would just go out the window and you wouldn't worry about it anymore because you've got so many other things to worry about. And, with all the comics and collectibles and stuff, for a lot of people, that's just part of their life. But, this guy in your book, that is his life. And just, it's kind of interesting the fact that people still like are trying to collect that stuff because it's something you wouldn't really think about.
Yeah, and this definitely takes place, a few years after events, and when you're trying
Yeah.
to settle back into some sort of normalcy, which we've seen in a lot of other post-apocalyptic fiction. But again, to me, once we kind of settled into that, hey, we got to rebuild our life thing again, I would be like, hey, I want to open a comic shop. I never got a chance to do that before the world went down. And I thought about, things like, one of my favorite shops is in the book Chicago Comics. That's one of the first places I would go and loot, see what they got hiding in there. So those kind of scenes just kind of came to my mind. And then I was like, well, this sounds like something fun and a different way to explore. There is, of course, which of course I would ask you not to spoil. There's a twist to why a certain group survived, which we're not yet revealing. So I hopefully people will find that cool because that was the secondary twist where I was like, okay, why are these people there? And once I found that why a certain group of survivors would survive over other, then I was like, okay, I think I have an interesting enough story. Let's make some characters out of it. And it's a lot about, like you said, the main character. He was an obsessive collector before things went down, and now he's running the last comic shop.
Yeah, I mean that was a big twist. I think, the biggest twist was, of course, the one at the end, the one that keeps you coming back for more. That one kind of blew me away. I was genuinely surprised by that one. That was a good one.
Oh, that's good. And we talked about this being a one shot, and I talked to Winston. I'm like, I really think that hook is like, I hate to just make it into two issues, but it makes sense to budget wise, time
Yeah.
wise. Let's just split it into two issues right there because I felt like that was the hook of the whole thing, right?
Dude, if you would have left it there, that would have been so mean.
Well, meaning
That's
there's more
terrible.
there was more to the story, so that would have been like the middle of the issue. And to me, that
Okay.
it didn't feel like a middle of the issue moment. It felt like let's leave them hanging on that note until they get to issue two. And
Yeah,
there's
because I mean,
oh,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and there's definitely more stories beyond these two issues, but I am realistic about Winston's time and my ability to put comics out.
Yeah.
So if it ends up only being two issues, I hope that people will walk away and be like, that was really cool. But if people really buy into it, then we definitely have more stories to tell. So I don't want to say that it's only that there's only one little story to tell here that's over two issues.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, and I've always heard that, when you end a comic, you should always leave it on some kind of a cliffhanger to bring them back. And that I agree with you. That wasn't a very that the way you ended it was the end. That's not a middle. That's definitely an end. I guess if you put them together, that kind of makes it the middle, but that was a good way to bring him back for the next one for sure.
I appreciate that feedback. And I'm not
Hey
always good
man.
about that hook, because again, I'm kind of I try to think, beginning, middle, end, and
Yeah.
sometimes I stop. I don't I don't stop at the right moment, and as a writer, I'm trying to get better with, because it is serialized fiction. You want people to
Yeah.
to be excited when they close the cover.
Yeah, you think in one shots. You think this is beginning, middle, end. You don't really think of kind of a serialized thing.
Yeah, even still, being part of comics, I haven't had the opportunity to write too many long series, so I
Yeah,
sometimes have to take, a longer story and then say, oh, let's break it up into three issues or something like that to give, people a chance to kind of mull it over, for a little bit in between issues.
that makes sense. So, when you came up with the idea for this story and, to open up a comic shop post-apocalyptic world, how did you how'd you settle on your story elements for that?
Well, a lot of my stories, it's like a scene, and it really was the scene, which is on the Kickstarter, so we can spoil that one a little bit. Um, where again, they were going into Chicago comics, they were searching for this certain book, and we actually didn't decide till later, what the book was going to be, but I just had that vision of a person, in a gas mask in a radiation filled Chicago, going to get that last issue and digging through the box. And similar to other stories, then I said, well, what's the story though? Like you got to go backwards. And then I was like, oh, he was a collector before the apocalypse, and he got separated, like a lot of these fiction stories from the people he loved. But where is he at now, 5 years later? Again, of course, he's still collecting instead of doing the right thing and getting needed supplies for his group of survivors. He's digging for that key issue for somebody that he wants to trade or that he's been looking for. So that was kind of where this story started. It had a different name. The name changed pretty late. I think I've been sitting on this idea for 5 or 7 years now. And again, once I kind of had the hook where he was a comic collector, I was like, ooh, L.C.S. last comic shop instead of local comic shop. And I couldn't get over my own cleverness, so that's why we slapped it on the front.
That's awesome. That's exactly the kind of cleverness I'd come up with. So I can appreciate that. So, and it's now that I think about it, it's kind of ingenious because, like I said, most people wouldn't think about needing to get their collectibles or needing to get their little, whatever. But this guy's like, that's exactly why I need to do this because other people aren't going to think about this kind of thing. So that's kind of genius.
Right. And again, my hope with bigger stories, slight spoilers for the future. uh, does that mean they're the only collectors? Like stories with The Walking Dead, right? They're
Sure.
battling people like Negan and these other survivors, but our word's about collecting. So who is he going to come across in the future? Maybe some other collectors. Maybe he's got something they want. So again, it seems kind of silly and over the top, but you know what? Post-apocalyptic fiction is supposed to be, right? So to me, his
Absolutely.
adversaries would be, people who have collectible items he wants, people, you know, who, are also in that type of world. So I hope that we can explore some of that, maybe around the whole country. Maybe he has to go around looking for certain things. So
Very cool.
I've definitely wanted to get to those bigger world in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when it comes to inspirations for this book, did you reach to anything specific?
Well, I love The Road, uh, by Cormac McCarthy. I did force myself to watch it. It's one of those movies where a movie, but also the audiobook, that you love, but you don't rush back to watch, right? So it's probably been about 15 years since I watched it. And I said, okay, I'm preparing for enter into a world like this. And it's hard to stomach. That movie's just so heavy. It's just,
Yeah.
leaves you kind of in a sour mood for 2 days.
Yeah.
But in a weird, enjoyable way.
Mhm.
So I definitely listened to that. I Am Legend, the audiobook. Some other ones that I pull inspiration from. Again, 28 Days Later is my favorite of that genre. Um, whatever people feel about fast moving zombies, I really liked it. Uh,
It was really good.
yeah, and there's actually Boom did an amazing comic run. It was about 25 issues,
Nice.
about a decade ago, which was really good too. So those are
Yeah.
the ones that kind of popped to mind and the ones I wanted to revisit. Again, I think if you've been following the Westhoff verse, uh, you kind of understand what type of a writer I am. I do have a hard time. I feel like I have some heavy moments in there, and I try to hit you with a gut punch every once in a while. But I'm a little more of a lighthearted guy. There's going to be a little bit of humor to it. Doesn't mean serious things won't happen.
Yeah.
I definitely kind of go in that direction.
That makes sense. And yeah, I'm not a big horror person myself, but I'll make exceptions occasionally. And 28 weeks, 28 days later was one of those I definitely made an exception for because I thought it was a new, interesting twist. So that was kind of cool. I can't really say much for 28 weeks later or possibly the long rumored sequel that comes after that that will come someday maybe. But
Right.
yeah, I can definitely see the inspirations from that. Very cool. Well, sir, so we've got LCS on Kickstarter right now for another week or so.
Yeah, and if you go to Kickstarter.com, Just type in the initials LCS. It's the first thing that comes up. I know links can be sometimes hard to follow, so that's an easy way to find it. We've got 13 days left as of this recording. We've we've had quite a few books this year. We've got a few more planned, so we've done some shorter campaigns. So people might blink and they miss it, but with a lot we have to fit in this year, we're not running as long of campaigns. So get in there. It's we're hovering at about 40%. So obviously we need a big push here at the end. So we appreciate you reading it and helping us get the word out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it does seem like, that seems to be the popular trend now with Kickstarter having, not the whole 30-day or whatever, having a shorter run. Does that help? Does that, sometimes is that a detriment? How do you decide on how long you're going to run your campaign for?
Well, I think experience plays into it. I've ran, a dozen 30-day campaigns,
Mhm.
and there's always 5 to 10 days in the middle that, you get 0 to 1 backers, which, is still good. You're heading in the right direction. But when you have to balance that against, where you spend your time, updating Kickstarters or sending out email blasts rather than working on the books, it's sometimes better to kind of balance that out. Most of your traffic comes in the first 5 days and the last 3 or 4 days, but you still want some time in the middle to get the word out. Again, for books like this that are new that don't have a built-in audience, of course you want to have some time, but most I'm in several very good creator peer groups, um, and we all talk about that often, and most have kind of gone to that, right, where we're kind of shrinking it just a little,
Yeah.
not taking too much time off. But then I've also seen guys and gals who have bigger followings can launch a 1 week campaign and raise 50 grand. But most of us in our peer groups, we're all around the same level. So we talk about it a lot, and some of it's just experimenting, right? Like
Yeah.
last Drumsticks of Doom trade paperback, I think it did 24 days. That did really well. Then in Zoop, I went back to Drumsticks of Doom 28 days. That did pretty well. But this one, I was like, you know what? We've got Indie Comics Expo coming up. We've got another book coming out this fall. I better try to trim some of the time off.
That's fair. Now, on this Kickstarter, do you have any, cool unlockables, cool extras, cool different features that people can find?
I think so. We have our awesome Winston Gambro full color cover as a magnet. We also have his amazing standard cover as metal, radioactive, glow in the blacklight covers. It actually glows
Awesome.
under blacklight. I had to get one. I didn't have
That's
one.
awesome.
We only made 10 of those, so those are super cool. So not only are they like the metal covers, which a lot of people like, again, they've got that additional kind of glow in the dark feel,
Yeah.
which is super cool. We got a variant cover by my longtime friend and collaborator Ray Wegner. Um, yeah, we've got stickers, we've got all kinds of stuff. There's bundles of all our part-time comics books. We usually bundle at a really good price as a way to say thank you for supporting the Kickstarter. So yeah, we just put up the original art. Winston agreed to put up the cover, which is pencils only. He didn't ink on the page, but then the first 2 pages of the book, he put up the inks for that. So we've got some original art there now. So we've still got a lot of cool stuff.
I really like that you do that where you pair your other books in with the book that is, the main feature, because that's actually how I've been able to try to slowly catch up on all the part-time comic stuff is, we'll back for this one, but then you're like, hey, you got a whole bundle of this other stuff here. So I'm like, cool, I don't have that set yet. So I'm gonna grab this set with this campaign, and then your next campaign, I'll grab the next bundle of stuff. So I'm slowly getting caught up. I'm almost there.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, it's like the best feeling when you see, you put it up, and we've got quite a few books now, and we're getting up,
Yeah.
around $100, and then it's like, oh my gosh, somebody whose name I've never seen on a campaign all of a sudden just grabbed all our books. That's what's cooler than that. So I always try to, again, give it a discount, make it enticing.
Yeah.
Jump in the whole part time. I'm fortunate too. Like a lot of my peers, they are co-creating with different people, so they don't want to quote unquote mix the budget, so they're hesitant to put their books in. But part-time
Yeah.
comics is me, right? These are all my
Yeah.
books. Throw them all in there, right? I don't have to worry about the budget for this book. It's just like, hey, if people want the books, jump in there and get them. Which helps. It helps each book. In the end, if just a couple people, or even the back digital tiers, that's a huge boon for us. So why not?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really nice when when creators will lump in other books that way, like for example, with Drumsticks of Doom, if someone hasn't read any of the other ones, they can jump back and get the ones from the previous campaign, so you've got the trade on sale right now, or you've got, issue 5 or whatever. You can always go back and get the back issue. So that's not everybody does that. And I think it's cool that you do because, and I mean, there's a lot of other creators that do, but it makes it nice. That way you don't feel like, well, I can't back this campaign because I've never read
Mhm.
anything before it. And there's no option to get the back issues.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody walking away, so we're going to continue to reprint those issues as much as we can. I am doing Drumsticks as miniseries, so there may be a time where the first miniseries is only the trade, but for now,
Yeah,
we can do that because as a longtime comic fan, there's nothing worse than going in the shop and seeing, issue 5 and not the other 4 issues. That happens
ex
to me all the time,
exactly.
which, I get why the shops can't do that, but for me, I definitely shouldn't. I shouldn't be doing that, right? You should be able to get whatever you want every time.
Exactly. Plus, the trade is totally worth it for Drumsticks of Doom because there's a great, other than the fact that the story is completely crazy and awesome, it's a super fun story that you should definitely read. There's a great pull quote on the back. So
Well,
everyone can,
you got to shoot another one out for this. You're the first one who read
absolutely. I'll
it.
get you hooked up for sure. Now, we spoke about it a little, so make sure everybody go check out the Kickstarter. It's on for, a few more days. Um, Spread the word. Word of mouth is our friend. Word of mouth is my friend. Word of mouth is everybody's friend. That's the best way because we got to fight the algorithm. The best
Hmm.
way to fight the algorithm is with word of mouth. So
Absolutely.
I'll make sure we get the links to the Kickstarter in the comments of the show. We'll help get the word out, get everybody on board. Now, we spoke about it a little bit, and before when we were setting up this call, I told you I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit, so I wanted to save a little bit of time for it. You had mentioned that your last campaign for Drumsticks of Doom was on Zoop. Now, a lot of people, I'm guessing, aren't familiar with Zoop just because it's a new thing. They don't understand how it works, um, unless you take the time to look it up. And, nowadays with the fast pace, everything going, people don't take the time to look if it's not really easily accessible. So I wanted to kind of give you a few minutes to talk about what Zoop is. For people that don't know, it's a very similar program to Kickstarter. There's a few differences, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to give you a couple minutes to talk about, what Zoop is, how it works, and kind of just that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first Zoop, but I have definitely backed campaigns on there. And like you said, in a workaday world, right, we can't keep up with all of them these days.
Yeah, yeah,
Used to be a time where it was Kickstarter or nothing. But now there's quite a few, and that's what Zoop is. They've been around for a few years now. They're actually, I believe they've offered public stock options and things like that. So they're
wow,
definitely building up, but they're
okay,
comics only. Um, they have a unique name, so I think that sometimes is to their detriment. But
yeah,
it's definitely rememberable. But it's also zoop.gg, so it's not .com, so that makes it even stranger. But
yeah,
all that being said, I don't work for the company, but I did approach them because I was looking to diversify. Things happen as a creator. Um, a couple years ago, there was the thing about Kickstarter using the blockchain, and everyone was upset they were abandoning Kickstarter. And I'm not here to comment on that, whether that was right or not, or whatever
right,
they're doing.
yeah,
AI has come up with other ones. So you just sometimes you get that sense that you don't want to be left with all your eggs in one basket and then not be ready to make a shift. And sometimes it's just about trying something different. I approached them about relaunching the trade paperback for Drumsticks of Doom. In my mind, I was like, they're a different site. There might be a different audience there who backs. And Chris at Zoop replied, pretty quick, and he's like, yeah, the book looks great. We love it. It's so cool, but we do have a very similar, audience to Kickstarter. So if you've already launched there successfully, there's not really a lot uh, to attain here. Now, if you want to launch a
yeah,
new issue, let's talk about it. And it was nice, to have a personal approach. If I email Kickstarter, they're great. They've always been great to us. We love Kickstarter. Wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Kickstarter and the backers.
yeah,
Um, but Zoop they just have that personal appeal. They can do it. And the one thing about Zoop that creators should know if you're listening to this, Zoop does an all-in package. They'll promote you. They'll do the whole campaign for you. You just send them the pictures and write up. They'll fulfill it. They'll ship it. They'll print it. They do it all. for
Wow.
a larger percentage, which Kickstarter doesn't offer.
Sure.
So that's different, right? Now we didn't do that because we're not a huge campaign. Um, we were able to do at a lesser percentage. It was just almost like posting a Kickstarter, except for again, they help you set it up, they run it behind the scenes, they do all your updates. But again, another thing they do differently than Kickstarter is they promote you on social media. Their email blast, because they're comics only. They have 4 campaigns, 5 at the most. So every email blast they send out, it has all the latest ones. Drumsticks of Doom just launched. Um, Tim Seeley's Hack/Board Game is ending in 5 days. SWAT is coming soon. They you don't get that from Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool too, right? You've got this
Yeah.
personalized approach. They're promoting you. They're cheering you on. They're in contact with you. So it's kind of it's that small business mentality, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
for sure.
I'm going to the small business rather than the Walmart or the Target. But they don't have as big of an audience as Indiegogo and Kickstarter. They've been around forever, right? They just have that built-in tens of thousands of people who've used their service and are on their email list. Again, you're one of 300 campaigns on Kickstarter, but they just naturally, every time we go on Kickstarter, we get 5 to 15 people who just found it, searching on the discovery page. And Zoop just doesn't have that kind of traffic yet. So
Yeah.
that's the big differences. But again, if you want like full service behind the scenes, their layout is much better. Kickstarter is very archaic. I think because there wasn't a lot of other options, I think they were slow to make some needed changes like behind the scenes and even in front of the scenes to how their website looks and interacts. So I think Zoop is like miles ahead in that regard. It's really set up like a web store and you can kind of just make your own little basket. You don't have to do certain tiers with, that kind of stuff. And then again, behind the scenes, they're very hands-on with everything, and they'll eventually send me a spreadsheet with all the addresses and stuff like that, and then I'll go from there in fulfilling. Whereas again, Kickstarter, you're doing everything. Every shipping fee, every thing that's typed on there is by who's ever creating it. So it's that experience was very different for me. So that's kind of Zoop in a nutshell. If anybody thinks of questions they have, I know a lot of people are branching out and looking into it. I'm part-time comics with an X on all social media. I'm always happy to answer these questions because so many people have helped me along the way. I always like, to help other people. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was an interesting experience.
That is awesome. Yeah, I've heard, a lot about Zoop. I know there's been some people who've completely converted over to Zoop, some that, kind of bounce back and forth. So that's really cool to kind of you get the nitty-gritty because it seems incredibly helpful.
Yeah, no, I think they are. And I think they have a bright future, especially being comic centric. I think a lot more people are going to start to gravitate. And then the more of us that do it, the more people are comfortable. Because I had several people reach out, which I was surprised. And they were like adamantly, like, I'm not switching to another program. When you come back to Kickstarter, I'll back you. And I get that. Not everybody's like me. I throw my credit card around the internet. I'm like, hey man, steal my stuff. I back if
Yep.
there's a comic I like, I don't care what site it's on, but not everybody's like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
People get very brand loyal and just the the familiarity of using Kickstarter because every time you go to a new one, you know, I did BackerKit one time and it's a pain. I get it.
I've
People are
heard
like,
that.
why am I typing extra information in? And it's not the shipping's not adding up. And it's just like we don't want to be hassled. We just want to click and get our comics.
Yep.
So
Gotta
I
make
get
it
it.
easy. Gotta make it
But
easy.
hopefully more people will go to Zoop. I think as of right now, you can see, when Jim Starlin launched a book on there, he did fine. He's got a name. When Tim Seeley launched on there, Ryan Brown, Matthew Ellison, when he did his Kankor book, they've got an audience, right? So they're going to do well wherever they go. But for people like us, kind of grinding it out here, it was a challenge. We were way below our average backer number for Drumsticks of Doom. Does that mean it wasn't a worthy experience? No, I think it was still great. We probably captured 25 people that weren't on our Kickstarter, so that's success to me. But it makes it more difficult, to go back to that well when it's going to be twice as hard, right? You're going to have to work twice as hard or launch a Kickstarter a couple months later to clean up the people who didn't want to come over and so there's some challenges for new creators. But if you have a realistic budget and you have like kind of a built-in audience of even 50 to 100 people,
Yeah.
you can do well on Zoom. I enjoyed our time on it.
That's awesome. Yeah, 25 people is 25 people. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if they're completely new users that never were there for Kickstarter, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah, and then hopefully they'll come over. The other thing that what I didn't like is that you don't really have a lot behind the scenes. Like you can't see who's backing, you can't respond to them individually with messages. So if a lot of us indie creators are very, OCD and hands-on. So for some people that might be a huge turnoff. They want to be able to reply to each backer, see who's backing the whole time. They were very nice. If I emailed them and said, "Hey, can you send me a list so I can see who I might need to reach out to who hasn't backed yet?" They were extremely helpful. But a lot of people like to be, they really like that being hands-on with every part of the process.
Kind of takes the personal touch out of it a little bit.
A little bit. So
Okay,
you're
cool.
you're kind of handing it off to them, and then kind of if they have a problem or something, they'll contact you.
That's
But
good to know.
yeah.
Very cool. All right, man. Well, where can we keep up to date with you?
Well, the best is Linktree/part-time comics. That has all of our links coming up, including for some reason or another, I've decided I wasn't busy enough. So we're doing a comic convention in the fall in Chicago, Indie
Nice.
Comics Expo.
Very
We
cool.
have a Kickstarter live, another one right beyond for Indie Comics Expo, and then we're relaunching Drumsticks of Doom for all those wonderful Kickstarter backers that are waiting for it there. So we've got quite a few things going on in the next 3 to 4 months. Again, it's part-time comics with an X at the end. If you type that into any social media, Google, whatever, we come up right away. So I'm always on the internet eternally. So, hit me up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Now, to find this interview and lots of other great interviews with a lot of other creators, make sure you check out our YouTube channel at Fueled by Weird or anywhere you get your podcasts. And now you can also find me on the Spotlight Media GA app, along with other great shows, including the Nerdy Man Room show with my friends Hassel and Monster. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Fueled by Weird. You can send me an email at fueledbyweird@gmail.com. Let's talk comics, let's talk games, let's talk Simpsons, let's talk whatever you want to talk about. Music for the show is by my friend Chris's band Polygon Horizon. The name of the song is called Pizza Force. It's a great song. Go check them out on Bandcamp. And I want to thank the sponsor for the show, the Zone Collectibles in Tifton, Georgia, your one-stop shop for comics, collectibles, and more. Make sure you check out John's campaign, Last Comic Shop, on Kickstarter right now. And if you like the show, please leave a review and tell your friends because word of mouth is our friend. And remember, kids, life's too short to be normal, so stay weird. John, thanks so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.